Hi kids! Today I have a super new model. It's the Seagull model Cessna 208B Grand Caravan from Legend Hobby. Now the Grand Caravan is a plus size caravan utility aircraft and it's the largest single engine airplane that Cessna makes. Now this model is also large at 85-inch wingspan and is meant for 30cc gas engines or equivalent electric power. Now it has lots of scale features like LED lights, interior detail, cargo pod, and working doors. Okay, so let's get started on this rarely modeled subject.
The all-wood structure is completely covered in heat shrink film that was wrinkle-free out of the box. First thing I noticed was the offset hinged flaps that are an impressive 2/3 span of the wing. Ailerons have nice hidden hinges with recessed hinge points. The wing is in 3 pieces, with a center part also holding the inboard flaps. And some nice woodwork and mounting hardware. My version has a colorful black and yellow adventure scheme, which is quite striking. Cockpit detail is nice with modern avionics depicted with a decal. Of course, I must mention the working doors. Woodwork is detailed and well designed with lightning holes throughout. The distinctive cowl has a nice glossy gel coat and felt durable. Semi-pneumatic tires are round with a metal rim. Included gas tank includes separate vent and fill lines. Not one, but 2 pilot figures are in the kit. A nice touch, even if they are a bit overdressed. Black and white manual has lots of pictures, which is typical of Seagull models. Ooh, it has lights. I like lights. And the Caravan has some fancy ones at that. There's even a light flasher control module. A big model needs lots of wiring. Oh, this is going to be fun. By chance, I found one of the wire harnesses was soldered backwards. So it pays to double check all the connections. Plastic wingtips hold the red and green navigation lights, which I hot glued into place. And C8 into final position. The wing leading edge landing lights were next. A vacuum form cover is then glued on. Control horns need some of the paint removed before being glued in the control surfaces. Some tape helps prevent the glue from spreading too much. Servos I'll be using are high-tech HS645 high-torque metal gear. With a pull guide, I install the aileron servos first. The flap hinges were a bit stiff for my taste, so I loosened up the pivot bolt slightly. Much better. Metal main gear legs were quite stout. And are mounted into a recess on the bottom of the fuselage with 4 screws per side. Note the use of thread lock. Gear fairings are made from fiberglass and are screwed into place after drilling pilot holes. Heavy-duty wheel axles are then attached. all-metal nose gear has an integrated oleo suspension and steering arm. It's then mounted to the firewall with 4 screws into blind nuts. There is an angle support strut for the nose gear, but the chrome plating was interfering with the screw threads. Normally I would have used a die to clean up the threads, but I didn't have one in the correct size, so screwing on a nut worked in a pinch. Much better. The strut fits into a bottom slot and to a pivot point on the nose gear. It seemed to work reasonably well, if a little limited in travel. With the steering servo mounted, the steering rod and laser cut supports are connected to the nose gear.
So the engine I'll be using is this RCGF Stinger 35RE. Now RE is for rear exhaust, and we've got the rear port here and the nice little muffler to sit on the back like that. And 35 for, well, of course, it's a 35cc displacement. Now this is just over 2 cubic inch in America terms. Now I've used several RCGF engines in the past, and I found them to be quite good engines. It of course is a 2-cycle gas engine that uses gasoline and oil mix. Now specs say it should put out about 4 horsepower. Now I originally wanted to use a twin cylinder version, but there was no way I was going to fit this narrow cowl without massacring it. That said, there should be plenty of power for this type of model. So let's get to installing it.
The engine bolted up quite nicely with the included mounts once I orientated the motor the correct way. Manual gives handy dimensions for motor length, which the stock mounts were very close, just needing a thick washer to make up the difference. For the cylinder head and muffler, I'll need to make a cutting template from card stock. Well, I do declare that'll work. One last thing is I'll need to make a centering jig for the cowl, since I can't mount it with the engine attached. Machinist blocks square everything up, and a small centering pin is used to align with a pre-marked location on the firewall. After tack gluing in place, the cowl is installed and centered. Then the template opening is scribed onto the cowl. I use pilot holes and a rotary cutting disc to remove the excess material. A sanding disc helps give a finer touch. Now to test with the actual engine. Hey, not bad, but a little tight. Some hand sanding fixes that problem. Now the cowl can be affixed with screws. To give the rear of the plane some attention, we glued in the elevator surfaces with thin CA and epoxied into the tail section. When that is cured, scribe the outline of the vertical fin. Remove the covering with a soldering iron, and, you guessed it, glue on the fin. I like to use painter's tape to hold it in place. For some of the harder to get servo slots, I used a hex drive servo screws from RTL Fasteners. Look for their info in the video description. The vacuum form windows will need to be cut from their sheets and glued into place with canopy glue. Elevator push rods will need some covering removed from the fuselage exit slots. There are 2 elevator servos, one for each side of the stabilizer, and have relatively short control rods. All the doors have handles and brass hinges. The magnet to keep the doors closed is very strong. Back on the engine, it was time to replace the always too short throttle arm with a longer version. I also plan to use a Dubro ball clevis, so I tapped a hole for 256 threads for the ball to screw right in. Now I can glue into place the pushrod supports. I also added some scrap wood for extra support. Since I will also use a servo-controlled choke, more scrap wood was used to make some servo mounts. The included gas tank is approximately 17 ounces and has pre-made vent and fuel line fittings. That big cargo door is handy to install the tank midway into the fuselage. A wood block and zip ties hold the tank in place. I didn't realize it at first, but there is provisions for a servo-controlled tow hook. A nicely machined metal release mechanism is mounted onto the top of the fuselage and connected to a servo, but I'll get back to that in a moment. For now, I'll need to attach a center wing section, which uses 4 nylon bolts. And metal struts. I use tape to mock up alignment locations, which is transferred to the wing fairing, so I can cut out the slots for the struts. I thought the strut tips were a little off angle, so I bent them out a little bit. After that, I could mount the top and bottom wing strut fairings. The cargo pod will also need to be trimmed to fit over the nose gear strut. It's supposed to be glued on, but due to the somewhat flimsiness and partial deformation from sitting in the box, I elected to screw it down with more screws from RTL fasteners. Yeah, the cargo pod really gives the model character. Canopy glue is also used to attach the radar pod to the wing. Alright, time to stop procrastinating and plumb up the engine. Mario and Luigi would be proud. Fuel filler cap is added to the cowl. I really like that modern ignition modules have a wide voltage range. Looks like I'll be using all outputs on the 8-channel Spectrum receiver. First up is the throttle control, which uses a clone of the Easy connector. And the choke works too. I had to remove the wing section again in order to fish through the servo wires. It was at this point I realized some wires for the lights were too short. So I spliced up some spare wire I had laying around to extend their length. Yeah, that'll work. Hopefully I won't have to take it off again. The lighting module has various flash patterns, which took some experimenting to find what I liked. A 2 or 3 cell lithium battery powers the lights. 2-piece aluminum spinner is quite nice. Though once I drilled the screw holes for the back plate, I found the prop slots just a little too small. So some reshaping with the rotary tool improved the fit. I returned my attention to the tow mechanism and trimmed down the release pin. Hey, that's pretty snazzy. Seats are velcroed in to allow easy removal. And pallets will be glued to the seats. Now to add the wings. And check the balance. Looks good. I left the prop off to be conservative on the weight. A 2-cell LiFi for the receiver and servos, and a 2S LiPo for ignition and lights. Again, the big doors come in handy for internal access. And with that, we have a UFO, airplane. Stay tuned next time for flight trials.